Welcome to this brief presentation on anxiety. Before we dive into the science, I want to completely reframe how many of us see anxiety. Most of us have been taught that anxiety means something is wrong, that it is a disorder, a malfunction, or a mental weakness. According to Germanic healing knowledge, anxiety is something entirely different. Anxiety is a biological response with a purpose. Your body activates it to keep you alert, to prepare you, to protect you from something it once interpreted as dangerous. Instead of fighting anxiety or fearing it, we're going to help you understand it. And once the understanding becomes clear, anxiety starts losing its power. The information in this presentation is intended for educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. We would like to extend our gratitude to Dr. Varghese for the opportunity to present this knowledge on the global GHK platform. Myself and Julie are both passionate educators of Germanic healing knowledge, guiding others to understand the biological and emotional roots of symptoms. We both came to this work through our own awakening to the body's innate intelligence, shifting from the fear of symptoms to honoring them as meaningful biological programs. Together we blend science, lived experiences, and compassionate guidance, helping individuals resolve conflicts, restore balance, and live in alignment with their biological natures.
From a German New Medicine or GHK German healing knowledge perspective, when someone feels anxiety, it means the body is responding to very specific biological conflicts. We're talking about very precise biological patterns in the brain. Anxiety shows up when the brain moves into alert mode, preparing us to deal with something we felt unprepared for. A person can have several conflicts active at the same time. For instance, fear conflicts, territorial conflicts, and separation conflicts. When these overlap with feelings of isolation or abandonment, the whole system slips into sympathetic overdrive. This is what most people describe as chronic anxiety: the racing thoughts, the tension, the restlessness, the feeling of being on alert all the time. These are all sensations that people often label as anxiety. However, there is more to the feeling of anxiety. It's about specific constellations we are about to discuss. Anxiety doesn't just show up out of nowhere. It actually has a very specific biological logic behind it. Your body activates anxiety when two particular conflicts overlap. Together, these create a constellation. The purpose of a constellation is very simple: to heighten your awareness and make you hyper alert to what the psyche once perceived as a threat. Just knowing this perspective starts to take away the fear, because you realize, oh, my body was never against me, it was protecting me. Behind what we label as anxiety in GHK, there are three major constellations we focus on. Number one, the frontal constellation, where the brain prepares for danger coming straight at us or in front of us. Number two, the fronto-occipital constellation, the panic constellation, where danger feels like it's coming from ahead and behind us. And number three, the paranoia constellation, where two fear circuits in the visual cortex, the retina and the vitreous body, are active at the same time, putting the psyche into hypervigilance. This is when the person is on high alert, scanning their surroundings for potential threats, even when danger is not even present. A person becomes overly alert to danger, scanning faces, environments, and behaviors for any kind of hidden threat. A fine example is how people behaved during COVID. People may feel watched, followed, or judged, and may check locks, messages, or their surroundings repeatedly as a way to prevent danger. This isn't mental illness. It's a biological survival program trying to protect the person from a past fear that felt overwhelming. These three constellations create the sensation of panic, fear, dread, hyper-alertness, and the feeling of not being safe anywhere. Once we understand the biological logic behind them, anxiety suddenly becomes much less frightening because we can see the patterns, we can see the purpose, and we can guide the body back to safety. In this presentation, we're going to break down each constellation, the conflicts that activate them, how they feel in real life, and most importantly, how to help someone come out of them. Anxiety is rising rapidly worldwide. Over 1 billion people now live with mental health conditions, and every year more adults and teens report worsening anxiety. In the US, 43% of adults felt more anxious in 2024, and 42% of teens now share anxiety symptoms, with nearly 1 in 5 in the moderate to severe range. Kids aren't broken. Their biology is overwhelmed by the world they're growing up in. So what's driving this? It's not one cause, it's the environment. Chronic stress. Kids live with non-stop pressure, social media, performance expectations, financial stress at home, and global uncertainty. A third of teens say they feel anxious about money, safety, and social pressures. Social media. Nearly 5 hours a day online exposes them to comparison, cyberbullying, scary news, and constant stimulation. Half of teens say it's mostly negative. School pressure. ER mental health visits spike during the school year. Academic overload, reduced play, testing, bullying, and social isolation all contribute. Many kids don't feel safe even at school. Family stress. Children absorb the emotional atmosphere of the home. Burnout, conflict, divorce, tension. Their nervous systems mirror ours. Learned behavior. Anxiety isn't inherited genetically. It's modeled. Kids learn how to respond to stress by watching us. And lifestyle mismatch. Poor sleep, inactivity, nutrient-poor food, and disconnection from nature leave kids without the biological rhythms they need to reset. So anxiety is not a disorder. It's a signal. Their biology is trying to tell us this is too much.
When we give children anxiety medication, we are not fixing the cause, we are muting the signal. Medications can numb emotions, increase agitation or panic. They also carry an FDA black box warning for higher suicidal thoughts in youth. Why would you want to give something to a child with such a crucial warning? Withdrawal can be destabilizing, and many kids develop tolerance or rebound anxiety from the medication. Most importantly, medication cannot fix school stress, social pressure, family tension, or a child's lack of rest, connection, or safety. It only masks the symptoms. Children don't heal when we silence their feelings. Children heal when they feel safe, supported, connected, and understood. When we talk about anxiety, it is not a mystery happening somewhere in the brain. It happens in very specific locations of the brain. The impact occurs in the frontal area of the brain. This is the DHS, right behind the forehead. This area controls preparation, action, and quick reactions. The pharyngeal ducts in the throat area and the thyroid ducts both share the same brain relays. When you experience a sudden shock, which is a moment that feels unexpected, overwhelming, or threatening, then this relay switches on. Depending on how intense it felt to your psyche, it can activate the pharyngeal ducts, the thyroid ducts, or both of them at the same time. This is why anxiety often comes with physical sensations like tightness in the throat, a lump in the throat, feeling pressure in the neck or the chest, difficulty speaking or expressing yourself, restlessness, muscle tension, racing, looping, or urgent thoughts. Your biology is literally preparing you to react, even if the threat is only emotional and not physical. Whatever hits the frontal relay during the conflict shock immediately shows up in the body as those classic anxiety sensations. Let's move on to constellations. We will first review how a constellation actually forms. A constellation does not come from just one conflict. It happens when two conflicts hit opposite sides of the hemispheres in the brain. When this happens, the brain circuits stop syncing properly, and that shift changes how you think, how you feel, and perceive the world. They are vibrating out of sync. The moment the second conflict hits the other hemisphere, the constellation switches on. Territorial constellations behave differently to those related to the constellations of anxiety. A territorial constellation is what happens when two different territory-related conflicts land in the opposite sides of the brain, creating a very specific emotional and behavioral pattern. In simple terms, it's the biology of feeling like your space, role, status, or position in life is threatened. These constellations that occur in the temporal lobes follow specific rules. They can create manic depressive patterns depending on hormones, laterality, and if the second conflict happens early in childhood, it can even stall emotional development, causing a maturity stop. This is unique to territorial conflicts. No other constellation does this. Now we will compare the territorial constellations to those of the visual cortex, which works completely different. When both sides of the brain relay are active, you don't get mania or depression. You get hypervigilance. This is the classic sense of being watched, followed, or feeling unsafe. That's the root cause of constellations which cause the anxiety. Within this area, we see a few key patterns. Frontal constellation occurs when there is a fear of what lies ahead. The frontal occipital constellation is the feeling of being trapped between danger in front and behind, creates a panic state. The paranoia constellation is the feeling of being observed or hunted. Once you understand this, anxiety and perception stop feeling mysterious and the patterns make sense. They become less scary. When someone is already in a territorial constellation, a third conflict naturally lands in the relay for the thyroid and pharyngeal ducts in the frontal lobe. When this happens, the conflict is typically experienced as a frontal fear. It is the sense that something is coming toward you that you must face head on. This then activates the frontal circuitry, and if another conflict is added later, it can complete the frontal constellation on top of whatever constellation was already present.
Now that we know a constellation switches on when the second conflict lands in the opposite brain hemisphere, the question becomes, what determines where each conflict goes? According to GHK, This depends on three things: your handedness, your biological gender, and your current hormone status. These factors determine which relay activates first and where the second one must land to complete the constellation. This is why people react differently to a conflict. For instance, a right-handed woman will not respond like a left-handed woman, and a man with low testosterone will not react like a man with normal testosterone levels. It's all predictable biology. What most people don't realize is that a constellation can turn back on through tracks. During a shock, the brain records every detail of what occurred. This includes the smells, lights, voices, and locations. Later, if any of those details appear again, the psyche recognizes them as danger and sends us a reminder and reactivates the program automatically. This occurs just like an allergy. A tiny cue can trigger the whole reaction. This is why anxiety can feel like it comes out of nowhere. Nothing bad is happening. However, your biology simply recognized something linked to a past shock and prepared you to survive it again. When you understand this, anxiety becomes far less frightening because you see it for what it is. With a little self-awareness, you can start to pick up the subtle cues and know when you have activated a program. It starts to become predictable. Your body is not defective. It's trying to protect you. Let's look at the first of the three anxiety-related constellations. This constellation is created by two conflicts landing on opposite sides of the frontal brain: male frontal fear and female powerlessness. Depending on your gender, handedness, and hormones, these two combine to produce intense anxiety and fear of the future. One conflict feels like something is coming at you, and the other feels like you cannot do anything about it. Your hands are tied. A male frontal fear conflict is the sense that danger is coming straight toward you and you cannot get away from it. Inside, it sounds like, I can't escape this, it's coming right at me, I have to face this. Your biology reacts as if you're walking into danger. Sometimes this is triggered by something physical: a car rushing toward you, a threatening person, an aggressive dog. But in modern life, it's usually emotional. It could be a court date you must face, a lawsuit or financial threat, a frightening medical message, a difficult conversation, a letter you weren't expecting, bad news that hits suddenly, even the look of an angry mother. And one of the biggest triggers is actually a cancer diagnosis. Even hearing the word malignant or seeing a doctor's serious face can create an instant frontal fear shock. Follow-up scans, biopsies, and surgeries can reactivate it too. Any situation that feels like you're being pushed towards something scary can trigger this conflict. The powerlessness conflict, the second half of the frontal lobe constellation. A female powerlessness conflict is that heavy feeling of, I can't stop this, I can't control what's happening, there's no way out. It shows up in moments when life moves faster than you can handle. Medical news, pressured decisions, relationship struggles, financial issues, caring for someone, or being stuck in a situation you can't leave. It also appears in smaller moments, like someone raising their voice, feeling blindsided, or being cornered by someone with authority. Biologically, it's like standing in front of a huge wave thinking, I can't stop this, it's coming no matter what. The psyche doesn't distinguish between physical or emotional powerlessness. The body reacts the same. When powerlessness merges with frontal fear, it's coming at me, the frontal constellation switches on and creates the classic anxiety state: tension, restlessness, racing thoughts, trouble sleeping, scanning for danger, worst case thinking, and sweating. It's not a malfunction. It's your biology trying to protect you from something it believes is bigger than you. A great example of a frontal lobe constellation would be a child taken to the doctor. The doctor's coming towards him with a big needle, and the nurse has his hands tied. That scenario could reactivate every time a child sees or even hears of a doctor and sees a needle. Simply put, it could feel like a giant wave is coming at you. You can't stop it, but you brace yourself. Even if the wave is just a phone call, a bill, or an angry mother or wife, the biology reacts as if it were real danger.
Let's review the physical effects of the frontal constellation. When someone is in conflict active phase, which means a fight or flight state, the thyroid ducts and the pharyngeal, or what is also called the branchial or the gill ducts, these two specific areas are involved. Both of these ducts have an inner lining that consists of squamous epithelium. They both come from the ectoderm and both respond in the same way because they are controlled from the cerebral cortex. During conflict activity, these ducts actually ulcerate, meaning they thin and widen. Your biology does this intentionally. The reason for this is so they can push more fluid through the ducts, so that you can have more energy and oxygen flow to deal with the situation that feels urgent or overwhelming. This can create sensations like tension or pressure in the throat, lump in the throat feeling, mild to sharp discomfort in the thyroid area. What many people call hypothyroidism is often just the thyroid ducts in conflict active phase, not a malfunctioning thyroid gland. When someone faces a frontal fear type conflict, these tiny ducts thin and widen to let more thyroid hormone move through, giving the body an energy boost for quick action. This can feel like nervousness, a fast heartbeat, sweating, or restlessness. Once the conflict resolves, the ducts swell and heal, and they may form temporary cysts causing fatigue. The high and low symptoms are simply the body cycling through the biological survival program, not the thyroid gland overproducing hormones. The same happens with the pharyngeal or the branchial ducts. Even though humans no longer breathe through gill structures, the widening of these old ducts boosts the flow and oxygen delivery during fear because the biological pattern is ancient. You usually don't feel the ducts themselves, but during healing, small cysts or swelling in these areas can show up as tightness, dryness, or tenderness when swallowing. All of this is biology working exactly as designed, widening the ducts so fluid can flow because healing occurs in a fluid environment. Hormones and oxygen move faster during a perceived threat. Healing of the frontal fear tissues. The thyroid ducts in a healing phase. When the frontal fear conflict resolves, the thyroid ducts start rebuilding the tissue they once lost. This repair brings swelling and fluid, which can look or feel alarming, but is simply regeneration. The ducts don't open to the outside. The fluid forms a small cyst, what conventional medicine calls a cold nodule. If it is bigger, it may be labeled as a goiter, but it is still just healing fluid. These cysts usually show up in the center of the neck. If the conflict stays resolved, the swelling slowly goes down and the cyst shrinks. If the person keeps getting re-triggered, the healing stays incomplete and the cyst remains until the cycle can finish. the pharyngeal, the branchial, or the gill ducts in the healing phase. These ducts heal in a similar way. They rebuild, they swell, and the areas fill with the repair fluid. This can look like mononucleosis, but lymphocytes stay normal when it's duct healing. If healing keeps getting interrupted, the fluid can back up and form a cyst on the side of the neck, near the collarbone, or even deeper in the chest, a restosternal stroma. After the brief epicrisis, the cyst usually shrinks, unless the conflict keeps getting re-triggered, in which case it may harden and encapsulate. Sometimes these swollen ducts are misdiagnosed as non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. When the body reaches the epileptoid crisis, in the frontal constellation, it can feel intense, but it's simply the brain doing its job. This is the moment when the premotor sensory cortex squeezes out the healing edema, the water that accumulated during the healing phase, like wringing out a sponge so everything can return to normal. Because this area controls movement and coordination, the crisis often brings brief symptoms such as lightheadedness, dizziness, poor circulation, or a few seconds of confusion. We can even feel spaced out or have a short fainting episode. The stronger the conflict, the more edema there was, the more noticeable these symptoms can be. A classic feature of this crisis is a temporary drop in blood sugar. The brain suddenly uses a lot of glucose to push out the edema, which can make a person feel shaky, sweaty, pale, or weak. It feels like low blood pressure, but it's not pancreatic hypoglycemia. It's just the brain pulling extra fuel for a moment. Then the body settles back into the healing phase and continues repairing normally.
How a frontal constellation feels. This is not a regular worry, the kind of stress we feel when life gets busy. It shows up as a persistent and almost obsessive fear about what lies ahead. Not because you're dramatic or overthinking, but because your biology is trying to protect you from being blindsided again. This is why people with a frontal constellation often experience exam anxiety even when they're fully prepared, stage fright even when they know what to say, fear of the future even when nothing bad is happening, a sense of dread for no clear reason, over preparation, planning 5 steps ahead, rehearsing conversations or outcomes over and over in their mind, difficulty relaxing because something feels unfinished or unsafe. Let's take a look at a very common real-life example. This man was carrying 2 major conflicts at the same time, and because of that, his whole system was on overdrive. The first was a frontal fear conflict, a deep fear of losing his business, of everything he had built collapsing right in front of him. From his psyche's perspective, this was danger coming straight at him, something he was walking into, something approaching that he felt unprepared for. The second was a powerlessness conflict, the fear of having to lay off his employees, the people who depended on him. He felt responsible for them and yet completely unable to change the situation. In his mind, he was being pulled into something he couldn't stop. These 2 conflicts, the frontal fear and the powerlessness, overlapped, and that combination sent him straight into a frontal constellation. He lived in a state of constant anxiety, eyes always scanning ahead, mind racing day and night, body tense, chest tight, dread in his stomach. He wasn't sleeping well. He wasn't thinking clearly. Every day felt like he was bracing himself for impact. But here's the beautiful part. The moment he finally took a firm step forward, something shifted in him, and the boost gave him even a tiny sense of control. He went after the payments that were overdue. He made the calls. He took action. And as soon as he did, his psyche registered, we're not helpless. We're not trapped. We are not going to die over this threat. We are doing something. And his biology immediately relaxed. The constellation began to unwind. His anxiety softened. His nervous system could finally exhale, because the body always responds to resolution, to feeling safe. Even small steps towards safety and control can deactivate a constellation and allow healing to begin. This is the power of understanding your biology, and once the conflict changes, everything changes. Now that we've explored the frontal constellation, we're moving into one of the most intense patterns in all of GNM, or GHK, the fronto-occipital constellation. This involves the visual cortex and the fear from behind. This region houses two major biological programs in GHK, the retina and the vitreous body. Together, they create the biological basis of what most people would call paranoia or persecution mania. This constellation is the biological blueprint behind panic, that deep instinctive predator fear, and even certain vision changes. Here's what's happening. The frontal lobe, which is responsible for perception of danger in front of us, and the occipital lobe, which governs our visual sense of what's behind us, both go into conflict active mode at the same time. When these two circuits overlap, the psyche interprets the world as unsafe from both directions. It feels like something is coming toward me, something is coming after me, I'm surrounded, I can't escape. I'm literally caught in the middle. This is why people in a fronto-occipital constellation often experience symptoms as sudden panic attacks, a sense of being watched or followed, visual distortions or hypersensitivity, retinal or glaucoma-like adaptations, difficulty judging space, depth, or movement.
What is the frontal occipital constellation? This constellation forms only when two conflict patterns land in two different regions of the brain, the frontal cortex and the visual cortex, like two alarms going off at once. The frontal area reacts to danger coming toward you, a confrontation, a diagnosis, or sudden bad news, while the occipital area reacts to danger behind you, being watched, chased, or stalked. When these activate together and include the powerlessness conflict, then the psyche enters a very specific panic state of feeling trapped, threatened from both sides, and unable to escape. It's not just psychological. The brain is widening your awareness to protect you from a danger that's coming from ahead and a danger behind you. The frontal lobe does not just process thoughts, as we explained in earlier slides on the frontal constellation. It controls the thyroid and the pharyngeal duct tissues, which are involved in preparing for danger. The occipital lobe controls the retina and vitreous body, the parts of the eye that regulate how we perceive what's in front of us and what is around us. These two brain relays sit diagonally opposite each other, and when both are active, that's when the constellation is officially established. The moment the second conflict hits, the psyche switches into a panic survival mode. The retina and vitreous body, two types of persecution fear. The vitreous and retina operate as a team. They're part of the same visual survival system. they respond to two different types of persecution conflicts. The vitreous body reacts to a fear of being persecuted by a person or an animal. It is a literal predator type fear that could be that even of a court case. The retina, on the other hand, responds to persecution issues connected to the mother, the child, or the partner, depending on laterality, someone that is emotionally close to you. If you failed at school or college, or you face some trouble now, and you're afraid of how your mother or your partner will respond, this is this conflict. So even though they sit side by side in the brain and work together in the eye, each one has its own very specific conflict theme. Together they help us understand why certain fears show up visually and why different situations activate different parts of the visual cortex.
What is important is that each retina has two halves, a right side and a left side, and each half receives light from the opposite side of the visual field. It's basically like a mirror. The right halves of both retinas see what's happening on the left side of the world, and the left halves see the right side of the world. The principle of laterality is reversed. Because of this, the right and left retina halves relate differently depending on whether a person is right or left-handed. For a right-handed person, the right half of the retina corresponds to fears related to the mother-child, and the left half corresponds to partner fears. And for left-handers, the sides would be reversed. The retina reacts to whatever we feel emotionally and whatever we see as a threat in our world. Retinal conflicts are tied to fear of persecution from someone emotionally close, a mother, child, partner, or anyone whose approval or behavior deeply affects us. This can show up as feeling judged, watched, criticized, controlled, or pressured by someone significant. It can also arise from situations that feel like they're closing in, such as a court date, tax audit, lawsuit, or even environmental threats like a hurricane or mold problem. Whether the fear comes from a person or a circumstance, the common theme is an ongoing sense of something behind you, approaching or pressuring you, even when you try not to think about it. During the conflict active phase, the retina actually reduces its function on purpose. This isn't damage, it's a built-in protective response, because the core theme of retinal conflicts is fear of emotional persecution from someone close. The biology tries to shield you, just like a child covering their eyes when scared. The retina slightly decreases its sensitivity to soften what you're taking in, saying, "This is too much right now." People may notice dimmer night vision, feeling visually overwhelmed, or things looking a bit muted. Once the conflict resolves and the person feels safe, the retina shifts into healing and begins restoring normal function.
During the healing phase of a retinal conflict, people often see flashes, sparkles, shimmering arcs, or zigzag lines. These are scintillating scotomas and often occur during the epicrisis, when the brain squeezes out the edema that built up during the repair phase. They are not dangerous. They are simply the retina and brain restoring normal function. The only real issue arises when the person keeps getting re-triggered. The retina then cycles between conflict active and partial healing, creating tiny scars over the time that can show up as nearsightedness, farsightedness, or small blind spots. Not because the eye is weak, but because healing was interrupted repeatedly, in a hanging healing. Once the conflict is understood and the psyche feels safe, the body completes the repair. The flashes stop and vision settles. The retina isn't failing. It's protecting you, and it returns to balance as soon as it knows the danger is over. Healing begins the moment the psyche no longer sees the predator as a threat. Let's review an example. Sarah has a boss who constantly hovers over and critiques her. Her biology interprets him as danger in front and behind, thus activating the frontal occipital constellation. She feels watched, tense in hallways, the office. She becomes visually overwhelmed and even gets flashes of light when stressed. Everything shifts when she realizes her boss is not really a real predator. He's just an anxious micromanager who treats everybody this way. The moment he becomes less threatening in her mind, her nervous system downgrades the fear. She consistently tells herself that he is not going to harm her, and for the most part, she will not die from his behavior. She also breaks her tracks by changing her email tone, reframing footsteps, calming her commute. Within weeks, the flashes fade, the pressure eases, and the feeling of being watched disappears. Nothing external changed, only her perception. When the inner story moves from I'm in danger to I'm safe, the constellation dissolves and the body returns to balance, to normatonia. Really, what is the worst thing that can happen? She may lose her job, but there may be a better opportunity out there. We have included some other case studies towards the end of the presentation. The vitreous body is the clear, gel-like substance that fills most of the eye. It's mostly water and keeps the eye round and stable so light can reach the retina. Like the retina, it has a right and left half, each controlled by the same side of the visual cortex with no crossover. Its brain relays sit right beside the retinal relays, showing that the retina and vitreous function as a team, a unified visual survival system.
The vitreous body responds to a very specific biological conflict, a predator approaching from behind. This isn't symbolic pressure from life situations, that's retinal territory. The vitreous conflict is triggered by a living being who feels threatening or too close behind you, a stranger following you at night, someone standing over your shoulder, an aggressive dog chasing a child, a threatening ex, or anyone whose presence behind you activates that ancient someone could harm me instinct. The body reads this as real persecution fear. This is also why people in this conflict feel neck tension or tightness. It is not a neck issue. The body bracing, staying alert, and refusing to relax because something is behind me. In modern life, a controlling parent, a critical boss, someone watching you, or an authority figure you cannot escape can all trigger the same response. The vitreous helps detect movement in the periphery. It's the perfect place for this survival program to land. The biology is essentially saying, blur the predator so I can focus on an escape. During the conflict active phase of a vitreous conflict, the body shifts into pure survival mode. The normally clear vitreous begins to slightly cloud, acting like biological horse blinders. The brain is narrowing the visual field so you can focus straight ahead and block out the predator behind you. People may feel visually overwhelmed, sensitive to movement, or notice something off in their peripheral vision. This isn't damage. It is the visual system reverting to an ancient survival program from early development. When narrowing the field of vision helped us lock onto what was causing the threats, and this extra focus enabled us to find a way to escape. The body is simply adapting to what the psyche believes is needed to stay safe. Floaters are one of the clearest signs that someone is in the healing phase of the vitreous conflict. They show up as strings, threads, cobwebs, dots or dust-like particles or squiggly shapes that move as the eye moves.
During the epicrisis, the brain literally squeezes out the swelling, the edema, from the vitreous relay in the visual cortex. This is the moment conventional medicine often labels as a glaucoma attack. When a retina conflict and a vitreous conflict run at the same time, the emotional experience becomes more intense because the person feels fear from two directions. Once again, this is a fear in the front, something they must face, and it is included the fear from behind. The fear that someone is watching, chasing, or pressuring them. The psyche feels surrounded with no safe direction to turn. It's coming from all around. This is especially common in children who may fear punishment by their parents from the front, while also feeling constant pressure or criticism from behind, always having to watch their back in case their parents show up. It's the emotional experience of being both cornered and chased. This constellation can feel extremely intense, often described as the sensation of being watched or hunted, because two fear circuits are firing at once. With frontal fear and predator from behind fear overlapping, the nervous system goes into a full 360-degree vigilance. People may feel unsafe in hallways, overwhelmed in crowds, or overly sensitive to movement and brightness. Some feel followed or observed, even while knowing they're safe, and others experience the world as too bright, too fast, or too close. It is the biology of dual fear circuits activating at the same time. This is the biology expressing the overlap of two powerful fear circuits, one from the frontal lobe and one from the occipital lobe. They are both trying to protect the person at the same time. The constellation heightens awareness, sharpens survival instincts, and pushes the nervous system into full vigilance. Understanding this alone removes so much shame, fear, and confusion. It is responding exactly as it was designed to when faced with layered fear.
This is a case study of a little boy named Luca. Luca's conflict, fear in the front and predator fear from behind. Luca is 7 years old. He loves school, but he has one teacher who is very strict, very loud, and corrects him often. When she calls his name, her voice feels sharp, like something coming straight at him. That becomes his frontal fear conflict. Then there's another layer. This teacher also walks around the room quietly and stands behind the kids while they work, looking over their shoulders. And for Luca, this feels like someone watching him, someone behind him. That becomes his predator from behind conflict. Together, they activate both sides of the constellation. He begins to feel unsafe in the classroom, jumpy when someone walks behind him, anxious in hallways, overwhelmed by noise or brightness, panicky when he thinks he's in trouble. He might say things like, "I don't like when she stands behind me. I feel like someone's watching me. Class makes my tummy tight. I don't want to go to school. It's too bright, too loud." This is the emotional expression of the fronto-occipital constellation through a child's eyes. Tracks that keep re-triggering him. Luca develops little tracks, sensory reminders stored at the shock moment. The sound of the teacher's shoes, her perfume, the hall outside the classroom, the school bell, certain worksheets, even the classroom lighting. These cues reactivate the constellation, making the child feel afraid even on normal days. What helps Luca heal? Healing begins when the perception of danger changes. In Luca's case, his parents schedule a meeting with the teacher. They explain that Luca gets scared when he doesn't know what she wants from him. The teacher, who genuinely likes Luca, immediately softens. She tells him, "You're not in trouble. I walk around because I want to help. If I stand behind you, it's because I'm checking on everyone, not just you." This one moment shifts everything. Luca's psyche reinterprets the situation. The teacher is not a predator. She's not hunting him from behind. Her corrections are not danger, they're guidance. Her footsteps are not a warning sign, just movement. This downgrades both conflicts at once. Breaking the tracks. His parents also help him break the tracks gently. They walk behind him at home in a playful, predictable way, so it's no longer scary. They practice safe footsteps. Dad walks behind him while saying, "I'm right here, buddy." They visit the empty classroom after school so the space stops feeling threatening. The teacher greets him warmly at the door each morning so he feels welcomed, not confronted. They teach him to say, "Can you stand beside me instead of behind me?" which gives him control. Slowly, his nervous system stops pairing those cues with fear. Luca's biology responds. Within a few days or even weeks, his panic fades. He feels safer walking into school. He stops noticing the footsteps. The being watched sensation falls away. The overwhelm in bright rooms eases. His vision and body calms down. His biology returns to normatonia. All because the perceived predator no longer feels like a threat. Why children heal so quickly? Children don't need complex therapy. They just need safety, reassurance, a shift in the emotional meaning, consistency, and one adult who truly gets it. Once that happens, the constellation dissolves rapidly. Their biology relaxes into, "I'm safe now. I don't need the survival response anymore," and the entire program winds down. The third constellation related to anxiety is the paranoia constellation. It sits entirely in the visual cortex and appears when two fear circuits there are active at the same time. Take a look at the image of the brain to the right of the slide, as if we are looking down at the top of the head. At the bottom, where you see the black dots, the bullseye rings visible in CT scans, the DHS or conflict shock falls in that brain relay location at the back of the head, the area of the visual cortex, with the crossover correlation. So the left retina and vitreous body falls on the right, the manic side, and for the right retina and vitreous body, it falls on the left, the depressive side. In this state, the psyche becomes hypervigilant, scanning for danger everywhere. People may feel suspicious, interpret neutral actions as threats, or worry about hidden motives. If the original predator fear was strong, this can escalate into the belief that someone is watching or trying to harm them. This often leads to compulsive behaviors like checking locks, rereading messages, hiding objects, or cleaning excessively. These are all attempts to prevent danger. Many become sensitive to being watched. They keep their curtains closed, sit with their back to a wall, avoid crowds, or constantly scan faces and environments. These are biological survival responses. When the underlying conflicts resolve and the fear downgrades, the vigilance softens and safety returns. Let's review a case study of the girl who never felt completely safe. Sharon grew up in a rural community in East Africa where safety was never guaranteed. From the time she was very young, she overheard adults whispering about break-ins, assaults, and violent crimes happening in nearby villages. Even though she didn't always understand the details, she absorbed the atmosphere of fear. Her parents often said things like, "Don't go outside alone," or "Stay where we can see you." For a child, these warnings imprint deeply, especially when paired with frightening stories the community shared about abductions, rape, and murder. This early environment created the first layer of what GHK calls a fear that cannot be shaken off, a chronic fear that sits in the visual cortex and teaches the psyche, watch carefully. Something dangerous could happen at any time. As Sharon grew into adolescence, she experienced a boundary violation. An older teenage boy touched her in a sexual way without her consent. She never told anyone, but inside she felt exposed and unprotected. This reinforced the same biological conflict theme, a fear that stays in her visual field, a fear that does not resolve. Years later, in her 20s, Sharon had several disturbing encounters that intensified this pattern. Once, she noticed a man standing outside her window at night, watching her through the glass. On 2 separate occasions, she sensed a man following her home, close enough to hear his footsteps, too close for comfort. Nothing happened physically, but her body registered predator fear, someone behind her, tracking her, closing in. Each of these events activated the second visual cortex conflict, the predator on my back theme. With both hemispheres now involved, the paranoia constellation was established. By her late 30s, Sharon noticed certain patterns in herself. She always checked her home twice before bed, every window, every door, every lock. When walking to her car or entering a public place, she scanned carefully, not only what was in front of her, but also who was behind her. Parking lots and stairwells made her tense. She often felt watched, even though she logically knew she was safe. When someone walked too close behind her, her heart raced. She preferred to sit facing the door in restaurants, kept her curtains closed, and was constantly on alert for sounds outside at night. Her partner sometimes teased her gently about being too alert, but she couldn't explain this deep biological memory her body carried. From a GHK perspective, Sharon was not crazy, and she didn't have a personality disorder. Her psyche was responding exactly as it had been conditioned to since childhood, scanning both the front and the back visual fields for potential danger. The constellation made her hypervigilant because biologically, this state had once kept her safe. When she finally learned about Germanic New Medicine and explored the emotional layers of her past, she recognized the sequence clearly: the childhood atmosphere of danger, the sexual encounter that violated her boundaries, the peeping Tom, the footsteps behind her. Each event had reinforced the same pair of biological conflicts until they patterned her nervous system. Understanding this brought enormous relief. She realized that nothing was wrong with her. Her brain had simply been trying to protect her in the most intelligent way it knew how. As she processed these memories and began to feel safe in her present life, her hypervigilance gradually softened. The world no longer felt like a threat from every angle. Even the blurred vision faded, and some eyesight regained.
This is a case study about a boy who learned the world was dangerous. It's a shortened example of a paranoia constellation. Daniel grew up in a neighborhood where danger felt close. As a child, he often overheard stories of kidnappings and intruders, and his parents constantly warned him about bad men outside. One night, someone tried to break into their home. Daniel never saw the intruder, but he heard the footsteps running away, and in that moment, his psyche registered its first predator fear. A year later, while walking home, he felt someone following him. It turned out to be harmless, but the fear was real. This activated the second side of the visual cortex, a fear that cannot be shaken off. The paranoia constellation was established early. As Daniel grew older, the content of his fears changed, but the pattern stayed the same. Instead of fearing literal predators, his biology began searching for modern threats. He became hyper-focused on toxins in the food, reading labels obsessively. Later, electromagnetic fields triggered the same fear response. Every tower or router or telephone felt like a danger he needed to track. Eventually, he became wary of government policies and world events, interpreting them through the same lens of something is after me. From a GHK perspective, Daniel wasn't irrational. He was running a double visual cortex conflict that began in childhood. His brain learned early that the world was unsafe, and it kept him in a state of hypervigilance to protect him. Only when a person understands this constellation, it can be downgraded, where the psyche can finally realize the danger belonged to the past and not the present. Let's explore an example of anxiety in children. This is a powerful story about a little girl with nighttime panic. This story beautifully explains how anxiety begins in the brain, why it shows up the way it does, and most importantly, how easy it is to resolve when we understand the biology behind it. This case study comes from Helmut Pilhar. The moment everything began, the DHS. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, had been completely fine during the day, but every night she became terrified. She refused to walk down the hallway. She cried, clung to her mother, and sometimes even froze in a specific place, heart racing, eyes wide, breath shallow. Her parents were confused because nothing bad was happening at night. Her biology was telling a different story. One evening, the parents asked her gently, "Sweetheart, what scares you here at night?" Eventually, she pointed to a spot in the hallway and whispered, "This is where I saw the scary thing." Weeks before, she had accidentally seen an image, something frightening, something her nervous system registered as a predator-type danger. Possibly a shadow, or a memory from a movie, or maybe something similar in the hallway in a children's movie. In GHK, this activates the vitreous body of the eye, the biological program designed to help to see us escape a predator. For adults, it is often metaphorical, but for a child it feels absolutely literal. The exact trigger, why the fear kept returning. The original shock happened once, but every night as she walked down the hallway, her brain remembered the moment. She did not consciously think, "Oh yes, this is where I saw that scary image." Her body remembered, her eyes remembered, her brain remembered. The hallway, specifically that one spot, became the trigger that reactivated her fear program. Even though she was safe, the biology inside her acted as if the predator had come back. This is why she panicked only at night, only in that hallway, and only in motion toward that spot. That's how precise the brain is. The conflict theme, it's a vitreous body fright conflict. In Germanic New Medicine, the vitreous body responds to a fear of being attacked, a predator-type fear. For a child, this could be triggered by a scary face, a sudden image, a dark shadow, a loud sound, a frightening movie, or simply something unknown that felt dangerous. Her biology switched into protection mode. Every evening, the hallway became that symbolic place of danger. The resolution and how quickly healing can happen. Once the parents understood this, the solution was simple. They changed the nightly routine. They turned on the light. They walked with her. They used a different path. They made bedtime warm, safe, and predictable. Within days, the terror was gone. Not because they treated anxiety, but because they removed the conflict trigger. With the trigger gone, her biology naturally switched out of fear mode and returned to calm. This is the beauty of Germanic New Medicine. Once the psyche no longer perceives danger, the whole survival program shuts off instantly. Why is this case so important for mothers? Because it teaches 4 essential truths. Children's fear is never random. There is always a moment, a shock, a trigger that made sense to them, and that the brain remembers everything. Even if the child forgets the story, their biology remembers the moment. Anxiety always has a place, a hallway, a room, a time of day, a person, a sound, and a shadow. There is always a location that reactivates the fear. And once safety is restored, anxiety then dissolves. No therapy, no medication, just a biological resolution. So when a child has anxiety, don't ask what is wrong with them. Ask instead, what frightened them, and where does their body still sense the danger? When you find that, you find the key to helping them heal.
Healing truly begins the moment your psyche feels safe again. Not when you force yourself to calm down, not when you suppress your symptoms, not when you push yourself to be strong, but the moment your inner world registers and understands that it is biologically trying to help you and to downgrade your perception to the threat. When your biology feels safe and softens, the moment you trust the unfolding, that spirit, that the universe is not against you, it is responding to you, your symptoms naturally downgrade and the anxiety fades.